morning. Day 12, basics that children need to develop. And what I want to start doing is looking at sound. And sound is really important, and we don't really understand very much about it. Though I think I understand more than most because I trained as a sound therapist. So on we go. So sound is our first myelinated sense. Even when you're inside in vitro, the infant can hear. So by 16 weeks, they're beginning to register sounds of their mother's internal organs, their mother's heartbeat, their mother's voice. It's not clear as you hear through air, but they are learning about their mother's rhythms. Certainly by 24 weeks, when a child in vitro is hearing sounds outside, it's turning, responding to sounds outside the womb. So by the time a child is born, there we have sound. It's our first myelinated sense. Sound is what's going to trigger the child to start screaming, or the baby. And we go on throughout life, we're using our sound to detect what's going on around us. It's a really important sense. And we will keep coming back to that idea that it's our first alarm, because also we can use it to shut down and we can close down and separate our senses. And you see that quite a lot in sound processing. But we forget about sound because we can't see it. And we think that whatever I can hear, you can hear. And that's just not true. And we think that children just get their sound switched on. And that's not true. So it's really important to have a think about how sound affects development. Sound definitely benefits from a natural birth. If you haven't had a natural birth, you had a premature birth, then you ought to be looking for issues within the infant around sound processing. And then there's the real killer. 80% of children under 3 get inner ear infection, and you may well have no idea. But that can impact on their sound processing, and come 7, when I can actually have a good look at what's happening with their sound processing and screen, I can see damage from inner ear infection. And I often meet adults well into life who come along, and what we're really looking at is inner ear infection from early years, which has impacted on their life opportunities. Hugely important. So every child needs to think about getting their sound processing really fine-tuned. You need to think about the very best child singers. All children ought to have sound processing at that standard. The ability to learn languages really quickly, the ability to learn sound, to learn language, to learn rhymes, all the sorts of things you would do as a child. You want people at the highest level. We don't want to see good sound processing as an exceptional skill, but as a normal skill. So sound therapy is important because sound processing makes sense of sound. When you go and check your child's hearing, the ENT therapist will say, "Oh, your child can hear." They will not tell you whether your child can make sense of the sounds they're hearing. They will not tell you whether there's ways in which we can develop the inner ear to get much better sound processing happening. So really important, we differentiate in our minds that just hearing isn't good enough. You've got to have a really good ability at making sense of what's going on with sound. And I want to take you just through a typical school day. And in fact, the images are going to use the ones I just took from a film the Chinese made on a day in the life of a Chinese child at school. I did this for my Chinese colleagues, but same pictures apply to every school worldwide. Have a think how many times your child needs to be able to process sound properly. Making friends. If they haven't got good sound processing, they haven't got clear speech. The other businesses often just close off and live in a little world. Good sound processing enables us to make sense of our friend's speech, to say the right thing at the right time, to be friendly, to change our tone and pitch and make sense of other people's tone and pitch of voice so we don't misinterpret it as unfriendly or aggressive. So, hugely important. When the child is in a classroom, they've got to be able to hear, against all the rustling and messing about that's going on, the teacher's voice. So you've got to be able to discriminate the relevant voice you want to hear from the background noise. That's quite a skill. Certainly a lot of clients, when I first meet them and I say, in a classroom, are you hearing blah, 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 Freddie? And they go, yeah. And that is all they're hearing. They cannot understand what the teacher is saying. They're trying really hard to please, but actually they're not processing well. And to be honest, in this picture, you can see kids who are off somewhere else. It's very easy. The child needs to be able to speak, to present their ideas. If they can't sound processing, they're not going to have clarity of speech. And in that is also the ability to sequence their ideas. Really important skill. And you can hear it in adults when they're umming and ahhing and they can't sequence their thoughts, they can't present, and it's very undermining for life if a person can't. So it is a vital skill that our children can interact fully in their educational process, present their ideas, engage in debate. One of the really big problems children face in school is the teacher starts moving. In most of my adult conversations, people are not wandering around rooms. But what we're asking children to do is be able to process speech as somebody walks around a room and their ears are having to make sense of it. That is super demanding. You've got two ears. The sound is moving, so it's a moving target. Those two ears have to process the sound as it moves. You're processing sound through air, but you're also processing sound through bone conduction. Your whole body processes sound. Your brain has to coordinate left and right ear, air and bone conduction of sound, get it into the right bit of the brain, and then process it in sequence. It's a pretty big job. And if children cannot follow the speaker as they move, as soon as the teacher sets off, they lose the speech. It is really important, particularly for those people teaching the bottom 50% of the ability range, particularly for those teaching SEN children, don't move. Sure thing, they can't follow sound. So staying put, speaking clearly, giving them a chance to tune in. Long term, you want to change it so they can cope with moving speakers, because it makes life a lot easier. But we just assume children can do it, and they can't. A lot of children cannot follow a moving speaker, and we need to get their skills up to the stage where they can. Children need to learn foreign languages. Gee, if nothing else Brexit has taught me, we need to cooperate internationally, and we all need to be able to trade and communicate internationally and work with other cultures. It's important. It's about civilization. Man does better when man cooperates. Man is wealthier when man cooperates, and everybody is better off. When we look into our own little island, we are worse off. So speaking a foreign language is really important. You can't do that without good sound processing. You can't even speak your own language without good sound processing. Every language has a different sound range, and English is very high-pitched. That makes it difficult for people to learn to speak English clearly without an accent. It also makes it really difficult for the English to go out and learn other languages, which might explain a lot. So within 6 weeks of birth, we've tuned our ear to our mother tongue and we're blocking out other sounds. And that makes it difficult to learn foreign languages. So we need to widen our sound range, make sure it's working really well, so we can easily access foreign languages. When a child reads, they've got to bring together their sound and their vision. The two have to come together and integrate. If they don't, what happens is the eye movements dysregulate. If you've got bad sound processing, the child can't read for meaning. It disrupts the process, it makes it very hard. And we can see in front of the class, little boy giving a very clear sign, he doesn't like reading, much more fun to put a book on your head. It is exhausting and frustrating trying to read something when you're not a confident reader. And you get zoning out. Children get so exhausted by trying to deal with background sounds, trying to process sound all the way through the day, that they get exhausted, literally tired out by school. I have a lot of clients say, my child comes out of school shattered. And it's not surprising if your sound processing isn't working well. Lots of good things about sound processing. If you sing, these people are busy singing the national anthem, I think, but any singing is joyous. Humans coming together to sing is a joyous activity, and the better your sound processing, the better you can sing. So we have some amazing choral schools in Britain. We know how to get children to really good singing. What we're not doing is getting them to good sound processing, so every child can achieve that kind of very high standard of singing. And that's what we ought to aspire to. Sequencing movements is really important, and it's part of sound processing. Sound processing is very closely linked to sequencing, and it's often quite easy to pick out from the big picture like this who's got problems with sequencing, with following what's going on around them. When you improve someone's sound processing, they can start getting into sequence. And you can see with these children, quite a few of them have difficulty keeping up with what they're supposed to be doing. They're slow in their processing. If you don't go over to right ear dominant, you can get a microsecond delay on your sound processing. It's really important. It slows down your ability to follow, to keep up, and so on. Your sense of space and proprioception is affected by sound processing. So you may have tremendous difficulty navigating because your sound processing isn't working. You might really not know where you are in space because sound processing affects vision. So you're not really quite sure. And in this game where the children are blindfolded and they've got to work out how to get to the gong and hit it, sound is really important. It gives you a very good sense of space. Much more than we're conscious of. Sound is very useful. In our inner ear, we have got various things. We have got our semicircular canals, which control our sense of orientation, whether we're upside down or not. We have got our optic nerves come in, so hence sound and vision can come together. We've got a link to our facial muscles, so our social skills are building. All of that agitation of the inner ear is very important. It's why children bounce around all the time, and there comes a point when they calm down. They don't need to keep bouncing around, and yet you can see with a lot of special needs children, they want to go on playing on trampolines. They're trying to agitate the inner ear. So that vestibular integration, the senses all coming together in the vestibular system, is stimulated by sound. It's in the inner ear, and it's a very useful thing to do. And as I said, the inner ear, motor skills, balance, orientation, acceleration, our visual nerves, optic nerve, our facial muscles, our sound processing, all comes together. If the inner ear is gunged up with ear infection or it's just got lazy muscles, it doesn't work well. Getting it working efficiently can change the global working of a human. It makes a massive difference, makes much more alert and much more engaged and happy. Sports performance, obviously it's your global development. It's massively affected by sound processing. So one of my neighbour's children did 2-week round of sound therapy, and suddenly they noticed he could jump on and off logs, he could climb along the log, he was much more adventurous. Simply sound processing was working better. So it's affecting your overall systems. I'm going to talk in more depth tomorrow about sound because there's a lot to it, but that's a basic introduction. Every child needs good sound processing, and we can achieve it these days, and it's pretty accessible with equipment you can buy yourself and get on with. So those are my contact details. Those are details where you can go and find sound processing equipment. Thank you for listening, and see you tomorrow.